Well, good evening, everybody. Welcome to our Ward 1 and 2 Town Hall this evening. I am coming to you live from my house, complete with Fern, as we do these days. Welcome to the virtual format. For those of you who've been to a town hall before, of course, these nights are about listening to you and hearing your questions and trying to provide answers back as best as we can as members of council. And of course, with me tonight are Ward 1 Councillor Claire Riepma and Ward 2 Councillor Keenan Elwin. We've all had to adapt to doing things quite differently, but we have actually found this town hall format now is working very, very well. Obviously, it makes lowers barriers to participation in terms of not having to travel to come to a physical location. But we also, of course, are delighted to be able to try and answer as many questions as possible. And with me tonight as well on the call, but not visible at the moment, are Lauren Wild from my office, who organizes town halls across the city, and Nina Brancaccio from my office, and our CAO at the City of Barrie, Michael Prowse. Lauren, we are recording tonight's session. It will be available later for people who miss it. If there are others out there that you want to be able to point this session to. And of course, if we can't answer your question tonight, Lauren is taking note of those questions. And if you want to provide us your contact details, we can then get back to you with either a more detailed answer or a better answer if we're not able to give you a clear, solid one tonight. We have had almost 200 people register for the webinar, and we have well over 100 people now in attendance. So looking forward to a good discussion. It was scheduled for an hour, but I know Councillors Elwin and Riepma are available a little bit longer, and we will be respectful of your time, but probably be able to go a little bit past that if questions continue. So with that, I really only wanted to say a few words by way of introduction, then hand it over to Councillors Riepma and Elwin. Of course, all politics is local, and the issues that when I knock doors, and I haven't done that in over a year now, but whenever I've knocked doors over the time that I've been in public office, it always is a reminder that some of the things that we might think are on everyone's mind at City Hall are not what's on everyone's mind. And in many cases, what's on your mind is what's going on in your neighborhood, what's going on with a particular issue around the city. You know, we want to address those issues both very local and citywide. And there are certainly lots of implications of COVID and opportunities that come out of it. And it's tough to speak of anything related to COVID in a positive way, but I do want to say this because I've always been kind of a glass half full guy, that some of the approaches to tackling many of the tough issues in our community that have been developed during COVID, and partly as a response to the pandemic, are opportunities for us to do things differently permanently and to make a long-term difference. You know, if I can say one thing about the response to COVID, it's that at City Hall and at other levels of government, I think we have learned that things can happen a lot faster and have a greater impact when the circumstances create that will. And you know, whether we're talking about how we're trying to address social issues in our community, how we are fighting the pandemic itself, how we're trying to support our business community, the last year has been characterized by brand new advances and approaches, and also tried and true approaches that we just didn't really have the momentum behind, but now have created some. And I hope we're able to continue that spirit of innovation and collective action forward past the pandemic. That being said, I guess the last word I'll give right now, I'm very aware that we're sitting here together on the last week of March at a time when our health unit has now ramped vaccinations up to 4,000 people a day. And that's a bit of a magic number because that's 1% of the population of Simcoe Muskoka every day. And that would mean it would take 100 days to vaccinate the adult population. It would take 100 days to vaccinate the adult population, but of course they've already done about 100,000 vaccines. So if the supply continues, if the success that the health unit has had together with partners in the community and vaccination continues, we know there are only a few more months of this to face. And yet we're at a very critical point where hospital ICU admissions have just exceeded the high point of the second wave. So it is a difficult time. The province has a very difficult decision in front of it. And we don't know what that decision will be before somebody asks me tonight. We will find out tomorrow along with everyone else. But as always, I'm hoping that Barrie will continue to try and think of each other and approach whatever trials remain in the last months of this pandemic for all of us, and we are all tired. But we'll approach it with the same spirit of community that we have seen in Barrie since the beginning of this very difficult year. So with that being said, I want to turn it over to Councillor Claire Riepma to give some opening remarks, and then Councillor Owen, and then we will take your questions for the balance of our time together tonight.
Well, thank you to you all for coming out tonight. And I guess you didn't really come out, but anyway, you're here. And it's great to be able to have this opportunity to chat with you. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking because I want to hear what you've got to say and answer any questions. I might say that spring is here or almost here. And we have some people who I call keener cleaners or cleaner keeners. Who want to clean up a park or a street. And I just want to say that if you contact me, I have some garbage bags and some gloves available. So I'm happy to support you in that. So with that, I'll turn it over to Councillor Elwin and let him say his couple of words, and then we'll have the floor is yours.
Thank you, Councillor Riepma and Mayor Lehman, and thank you to the staff, Lauren and Nina from the Mayor's office for putting this together. And thank you to all of you who have are attending. I recognize a lot of the names in the list, and it's so great to see you out. I do want to take a second to acknowledge that at least I'm gathered on the territory of the Anishinaabe people, the Odawa, Ojibwe, and Potawatomi nations, who are collectively known as the Three Fires Confederacy. And as a settler myself, I think it's particularly important that we recognize that in the political world, considering the past legacy of colonialism and the ongoing legacy of colonialism and the ongoing colonial violence that happens on this land. I did want to provide a quick update on a couple of things before we get started, and I'll go through them really quickly. So the supervised consumption site process is well underway and community consultations are happening right now. There's a survey that just closed today, but there's more opportunity for people in the direct vicinity of the proposed sites. So you can go to smdhu.org/SCS feedback to learn more about those engagement sessions, and you can register at that location. So that's that. I'm glad Claire mentioned the community cleanups. Feel free to reach out through my website, keenan.ca, if you'd like to organize a cleanup. I had one resident today who was very keen to get started, which is exciting. The Vesper Street property, I've had a lot of questions about the old fire hall location, and I've met with a few residents socially distanced on the site itself, and it was a great meeting where we discussed some of the concerns. And I want to be clear, Council has approved the soil remediation work on the site, and we've directed our staff to design a request for proposal process for a potential housing project on the site. And as part of that process, there will be a formal neighborhood engagement session. So we want to engage the neighborhood and hear from the neighborhood on that. So that's it for me for now, and I'm looking forward to the questions. Thanks for being here.
Okay, folks, the way this will work tonight, we do have a large number of questions that were pre-submitted, but we also want, of course, to hear, have people be able to ask questions here on the call. Lauren Wild will be moderating a little bit, both reading us some of the pre-submitted questions and turning people on and off in terms of bringing you into the webinar to ask your question live. So if you do want to ask a question, do raise your hand using the Zoom function there, and that will allow Lauren to go to you to get your questions. And with that, I'll turn it over to our moderator, Lauren.
Thank you, Mayor Lehman, and thank you all for participating. So our first question will be coming from Kate, who's just got her hand up. So I'm going to add her to the chat here. If you'd like to unmute yourself, Kate.
Thank you. I recently attended a committee of adjustment meeting along with several neighbors, and following this meeting, we all agreed that we have some serious concerns about both the structure and the conduct of the committee. So we would like to know who we should address those concerns to.
Well, you can send them to myself and council. So if you address mayor and council, that will be distributed to all members of council. It would also be useful for you to copy the city clerk, because the clerk is the one who typically makes recommendations to us about improvements to process.
Okay.
And if it's specifically around how the hearings are conducted, then yes, that would be the best. That'd be the best thing to do.
Yeah, how they're conducted, and perhaps some of the guidelines concerning who can sit on the committee.
Okay, so that is through the public appointments process that begins at the start of the term. So those are, of course, citizen members who were selected based on some of their background. I'm going to read between the lines here and say that I'm guessing you disagreed with the nature of some of the comments from one or more members, and I guess I would suggest you let us know about what those concerns were. I mean, certainly the committees are also covered by the Code of Conduct, which covers not only city councillors but all members of city appointed committees.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, we also have a concern about real estate agents being on the committee, but
Okay.
I can address that further in my correspondence.
Sure, that would be great. Thanks, Kate.
Okay, thank you for your time.
Of course.
Thank you, Kate. So we have a question. Is there any update on the anti-mask protests that are going on downtown in terms of what's going on to address this situation?
Well, I can start on that, then maybe hand it over to Councillor Aylwin as well. He and I both share quite a bit of concern around these particular events, and those who may have read my comments in the media last week will note that, I recognize the right to protest. That's a right that all Canadians have. But that right does not extend to putting other people at risk. And it does not extend to repeatedly and frankly, flagrantly violating a law of the land, which the emergency order, it's the Safe Reopening Act. The Ontario government actually enshrined into legislation the public health measures. Now, having said that, the important distinction here is that in Canada, for very good reasons, politicians do not tell the police how to do their jobs or how to enforce a law. That is absolutely forbidden in terms of any political interference in decision-making around enforcement. So the way that this works properly, there's some separation between Councillor Aylwin, even myself as the mayor and a member of the Police Services Board. I cannot direct the police in terms of do this by way of enforcement, crack down on this, don't crack down on this. We have to convey those concerns to the police, and those decisions are made by the enforcement agencies. I will say in advance of the meeting or the event, which was, a protest sort of disguised as a family event on Saturday, the health unit and the police did meet and discuss their approach to this and what will happen if there are ongoing protests. I can tell you that they are, they were there, they were prepared to, under certain circumstances, go further than they did. I believe they are prepared to go further than they did if these sorts of protests continue. Councillor Aylwin, is there anything on this you wanted to talk about?
Thank you, Mayor Lehman, and thank you for that question. It's definitely something that I've been thinking a lot about and worrying about a lot. It's very concerning to see a crowd of unmasked people gathering in our downtown and putting people and especially vulnerable members of our community at risk. And like Mayor Lehman said, I believe firmly in the right to protest and to have freedom of expression, but not when you're putting people at risk so blatantly. So I'm hoping that a solution can be reached that both respects freedom of expression and respects public health measures designed to protect people in our community. And I'll leave it at that because Mayor Lehman did touch on it. Thanks.
I think, that solution likely is that if the irony of an anti-masker protest wearing masks to protest safely. It does not escape me, but that would be a different situation. It is possible to gather safely outdoors in modest numbers to protest something. So I'll give you an example. There was a dance academy. Many of you probably saw this about a month ago when the emergency brake was applied and dance schools were forced to close. A dance troupe came to City Hall. There were 12 of them. They were 6 feet apart, and they held a sort of dance-off protest. And they were masked and outdoors and distanced. And of course, that doesn't break any laws. So, I don't believe for a moment that this particular group of individuals would do that. But it is possible to exercise your right to protest without putting other people at risk, even during COVID.
Thank you so much for those comments. So I just remind participants, if they do want to be added to speak, all you have to do is raise your hand and we'll just go in order. So the next one up we have is Sebastian. Can we unmute Sebastian?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Hi, Sebastian. Nice to
Hey,
meet you.
guys, long time no see. And my question's fairly simple and straightforward. Realistically, during COVID, seeing as I haven't seen any of you in way too long, what are just some the best ways to just be communicating and doing and being engaged with you guys during COVID, other than just seeing you on screen right now? What are ongoing things that I can do?
Well, why don't all three of us answer that? For me, I would suggest social media is not a bad way, although I don't recommend, I never want to say that because I miss far more messages than I'm able to reply to, particularly on Facebook. If you send me an email, you will eventually get a reply, and I have to say eventually again due to volume.
Sure.
But, in terms of staying up to date with what's going on at the city, if you are able to follow the city's social media channels, that'll give you a very good sense, because we've been trying to communicate more during COVID, both about COVID related stuff and what's going on at the city.
Sure. And then that's great stuff. I'm definitely, keeping up with all the YouTube videos and all that. But what are that I love hearing it. What are active things I can do on my side to communicate back? I mean, I get the email piece, but is there anything that's a bit more talking face to face like this than just reading emails? Because I just hate looking at a computer screen and just looking at the types and not seeing people's faces.
Yeah, I think all of us are sick of it. Claire?
Yeah, and I think, for me, the best way to connect with me is by email. I will get back to you, even if it takes a bit of time. Sometimes I get way more emails than I have time.
Sure.
And of course, you've got my phone number. It's on the city website, and I'm happy to talk to people if I have that opportunity.
Sure.
Facebook and Twitter and those kind of things are not my strong suit, and I have lost quite a few direct messages. So if you really want to get a hold of me, phone or email is the best way.
Awesome. And you, Keenan?
Yeah, no, I've been thinking about that a lot too. I live alone. I'm lonely. I want to interact with people and connect with people in the community. I miss that so much. I was holding my monthly roundtable discussions at the library before the pandemic, and oh gosh, I miss that so much. But Sebastian, I owe you a phone call. And there's actually a community cleanup. You asked about a community cleanup the other day, so a resident's organizing one, and I'll connect with you offline, and maybe we can walk around, have a chat, and pick up some garbage.
Cool. And not to belittle the point, but just to throw it out there, on Jeff's note of sort of that socially distance process with the dancers, I do think there are ways to be outside while socially distanced, not just protest, but actual civil engagement as well. And just maybe throw it out there and leave it at that.
Thanks for that.
Thanks so much, Sebastian. So next up, we've got Brandon with his hand up. So I'm going to allow you to talk, Brandon, if you want to add to the conversation.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having this Q&A. My question is actually around the speeding, in particular the Ward 1, but I know that's a pretty big issue in Ward 2 as well. I think we have all noticed a massive influx in accidents, and unfortunately, deaths. I've personally seen a lot of deterioration in the last 5 years. I've got grave concerns on all that. So I guess this is probably more so for Claire, since this is your work here. So. Oh, sorry.
And Brandon, thanks for that question. I've got to say, if there was an easy answer, we would have found it by now. Yeah, every summer we put out some speed bumps in each ward, and that tries to help a little bit. One of the things that I do is when there is a sort of a concentrated area where I'm getting a lot of complaints, I can send that off to the police and have them do a little extra enforcement there. We kind of have that little protocol going back and forth. So if you want to connect with me and let me know where the speeding is happening, in particularly at what time of day, if possible, then I can alert the police and they can do a little bit of enforcement. You know, the big problem with speeding is that our roads were designed for higher speeds, higher volumes. They were designed by traffic engineers, and their intent was to move traffic. And we're left with that legacy. And in a lot of ways, you know, we really have to look at our road design and to try to reduce those speeds and make them safer for everybody. We've had a couple of tragedies right in Ward 1 and on the border, and yeah, we just really don't want that to be happening anytime soon. And we've got lots of kids, so yeah, it's a problem, and yeah, we're working on it in terms of enforcement, but that's about the best we can do at this point.
I think one of the things that's, well, and Brandon, I think right at the end there, we heard one of the reasons why you're probably extra concerned about this. Sounds like a little one.
Yeah.
Automated speed enforcement is, which is photo radar in, for example, in school zones, is something that has received a fair amount of support from this council. We have had to wait a little bit on both some provincial legislation and then the technology, but that's a live file and opportunity for us. And it's actually something I was talking to the Minister of Transportation about last week, because ASE is something that Toronto does, a few other regions do, and now can actually be spread into other cities, including ours. So I would bet that is something that you'll see in Barrie. I hope it will help. In the meantime, Claire is quite right that targeted enforcement is often the quickest and most effective solution. The other thing that, just to touch on quickly, is council has chosen to grow the permanent traffic calming program. So not just the temporary bumps, but to start to do some actual design changes to roads, which hopefully can help in retrofitting in some of the worst, most problematic streets.
Great, thanks. I will. I'll reach out to you, Claire, just with our situation, and I'll let you know.
Yep.
Just quickly, I wanted to add in, I agree completely about the point that Claire made about the road design. That's sort of the heart of the issue there. We've built wide streets where it feels like a raceway, a speed track. And that's not an easy problem to fix. Those are massive infrastructure projects to narrow those streets. But one small thing that I think we can do is lower speed limits on our residential streets. I have a motion that was deferred just this past week because we ran out of time at our council meeting, but I'm hoping that we can take a good hard look at that. I realize it's not going to be a silver bullet by any means, but the World Health Organization does say that a pedestrian or cyclist, vulnerable road users, have a 90% survival rate when hit by a vehicle traveling at 30 kilometers per hour or less. And that survival rate falls drastically once you get up over 45 kilometers per hour. So these deaths and injuries are preventable, and I'd like to see us do everything we can. Thanks for that.
Yeah, I mean, reducing the speed limit, it may not solve the root of the issue, but I think everyone has a threshold they're not willing to cross when they're speeding, and lowering that speed, you know, then they're still going to speed, but that speed will still be lower than where it's at now. So it definitely would help. And having that photo radar and speed cams, I'm a huge believer in those. So I hope to see those as well.
Thanks, Brendan.
Thanks, Brendan.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks so much. So next up, we've got a couple of questions on this topic. Can you talk more about rooming houses and enforcement? So we see a need and a push for affordable housing, but residents are experiencing a lot of different issues with rooming houses, including absentee landlords, those that are just paying the fines and not remedying the issues, as well as related issues of parking and noise and garbage. Can you speak a little bit about some of the controls around that?
Well, I guess that falls to me because in Ward 1, we probably have more rooming houses, particularly ones that aren't approved, than anywhere else on the planet, I think, but maybe especially in the city, especially in the area around the college. And it's a problem, as the questioner says. I mean, garbage, cars, traffic, all those kind of things, and the problem is that some of these houses are left to deteriorate, and we've had 10, 15, sometimes 18 people living in a 3-bedroom house, and all of that is just not safe and not appropriate in a single family area. And so it's caused a lot of conflict in the ward, and I'm hoping to try to figure out how to solve that. We have a property standards bylaw that supposedly is to keep property standards up, but it hasn't worked. And in fact, it's, as far as I can tell, it's not working. We also have the boarding, rooming, lodging house legislation. We also have zoning that says you can't park on the lawn. None of those seem to really be effective. And so I'm looking for a new tool to be able to deal with that. And we're not the only ones that are having a problem with it. Windsor and Hamilton are now looking at similar situations, and London and Waterloo and St. Catharines also have absentee landlord bylaws. And I think we need to have another look at that. Can we actually put in some legislation that says before you rent out your place, and if you don't live there, you need a license, just like any other business. If you're going to turn that building into a commercial operation, then you need a license. And I'm not saying that would be the be all and end all, but at the same time, it gives the city a chance every year to look the absentee landlord in the eyeball and say, you're a great guy, you're doing a fine job, here's your license. But that 1 in 10 or 1 in 20 that is doing a bad job and not managing his tenants and not managing his property, we could have a heart-to-heart talk with them and say, look, you either have to change your act, or next year you're not getting a license, and that's it. I think we have to start moving in that direction, and I know that there are community groups that are forming in Ward 1 that are really looking to have something like that put into place. And it may not have to be for the whole city. Maybe we just do it in Ward 1 as a pilot for a while and see what kind of impact we have. I know that as a city, we've increased our enforcement of these things, but it really hasn't made a difference yet. So if somebody comes up with a magic bullet, I would be happy to find out about it.
Thank you so much, Councillor. We've got Beth Foster is up next with her hand up. So I'm just going to allow you in. Beth, can you unmute yourself? Perfect.
There, I think I'm unmuted. Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Thanks for this opportunity. This is a wonderful chance to speak to all of you. And thanks for all the great work you're doing in this tough time. I'm asking, it's a 3-pronged question, but it's all about the trees. And I'm just asking about tree protection, especially in wards 1 and 2. And specifically, Are there plans to make it necessary to get municipal permission to take down trees, especially mature trees, on private property? In the city of Markham, for instance, you have to get permission to take down a mature tree. Second part, are there plans or directions for reforestation in wards 1 and 2? Because there are a lot of places that need trees now. Many have come down. I know a lot of them are ashes, but we really need, I think, to be planting a lot more. And is there any momentum around park preservation, enhancement, or expansion? Because with increasing density in both these wards, it's certainly been so evident in the past year that our green spaces and our trees are really essential for the health of people and for the health of the planet. And does the city of Barrie have a plan around trees? Thanks so much.
Thanks. And I get why you picked that particular background picture or profile picture.
Oh, you can see that?
Yeah, beautiful forest. So thanks very much. Thanks for the question, Beth. And I'll start. And so first of all, full credit to Councillor Aylwin, who on Monday moved a motion to make Milligan's Pond a park, which would actually involve cleanup and amenities. And I think what's historically not been any attempt to really manage the vegetation in there would be more managed. And I think it's particularly relevant because the highest density new development, of course, is coming about a block east of Milligan's Pond along Bradford Street. And your point is well taken that with many more people living in the area, we can expect our parks to get busier, even busier when it comes to the waterfront. So are we going to see greater supply? And of course, where you're in a constrained sort of environment, the opportunities to physically expand or create new parks are somewhat limited, but they're not zero. And I think, one of the really great opportunities that has always existed for us in Ward 2 in particular is to take what are right now sort of informal and or privately owned water courses and make them into naturalized corridors leading to the lake. So Kids Creek was naturalized, a section of Kids Creek, and of course we're just finishing daylighting Kids Creek across the former Barrie Central site, one that you and I know very well, and through the former Brookdale Inn site across the street. And I think the opportunities to do that along the other creeks at the foot of the bay do exist to create additional green space. And the other thing I would note there is we never really finished implementing the waterfront plan. So the very north end of our waterfront, we've got 4 or 5 parking lots between the road and the water. And that vehicle space, those kind of run down and in 2 cases gravel parking lots are a great opportunity for additional public space and parkland right on our waterfront. So I'd like to finish that. I'd like us to turn those parking lots into public space. And that is one of the things that the new West End Revitalization Task Force is going to be taking a look at.
Great.
Just very quickly on the tree, there is no tree bylaw at the moment, private property being private property. That was always a bit of a step too far for council, but I think the more time passes, the more I hear people talking to me about the link between mature trees and the character of neighborhoods. And where unhealthy trees are removed, or if a tree has become dangerous, of course it needs to be removed. But where they're removed for kind of unnecessary reasons, that's where you get really frustrated. And I hear it every time one comes down. So are there plans for a bylaw? No. Is there an increasing awareness of, I think, the issue? Yes. So we'll take that feedback and we can certainly think about what we do with that. Claire Keenan, did you want to jump in on this?
Sure, I agree. I know that our sustainability committee was talking about a private tree cutting bylaw. Don't know where that stands at the moment, but it's certainly something that I would like to see move forward in some fashion or other. I might say, yeah, the ash borer has certainly done some damage in Ward 1. We've lost quite a few street trees, and we're going to lose more this summer along Shoreview Park and Indian Arrow in that area. So that's problematic. We do replant the trees, but I think we need to do more of that, and I would like to see us do more of that. And also kind of engage the public, because it's one thing to plant a tree and it kind of stands there and 5 years later it's still not doing very much. Whereas if we can engage the neighborhood to look after the tree, to water it, fertilize it, and love it, then that tree's got a lot better chance of surviving. So I'd like to see us sort of engage the neighborhood more in order to do that.
I think that's a brilliant idea. Thank you.
Thanks for that question, Beth. I just want to add on quickly. So the city does have an urban forestry strategy, and we have had a presentation at the Sustainability Committee about that. And interestingly enough, Barrie is doing really well in comparison to other municipalities in terms of our canopy cover, but we have goals in that strategy to increase that canopy. And I'm hoping that we can do that by partnering with some local groups like Living Green Barrie, the Lake Simcoe Regional Conservation Authority, to have those tree planting events on public lands, but also I think private land too. We need to get into that because most land in the city is private land. So as many trees as we can plant on that land is a good thing in my mind. And one thing on the protection of existing trees, through our planning process, when a new development comes forward, often there's a tree preservation plan, and the developer demonstrates through that plan how they're protecting the mature trees. Not all the trees get protected, but it is a way of holding their feet to the fire to ensure that we protect our existing tree canopy.
Thank you so much. I appreciate your time.
Thank you so much. And just to build on one of the topics that Mayor Lehman mentioned, Councillor Aylwin, you had mentioned about the park proposal. Perhaps you could speak to that, as a resident is looking for some more information about that.
Great question. Thank you. So I moved a motion at council on Monday, and it did get tentative approval with ratification happening in 2 weeks, but it's to have our staff investigate making Milligan's Pond an actual park with the amenities and maintenance that other parks receive. I just spent my last Saturday, 3 hours of my Saturday, cleaning up in Milligan's Pond with some of the social agencies, with some people who live in the area, and we filled up 2 huge dumpsters full of stuff, and there is a lot more to go. So Milligan's Pond is not in good shape in terms of the natural environment, and then in terms of there's some safety issues, and it really is a beautiful area in there. So I'm hoping that we can really make that area shine, so that current residents who are lacking in green space, especially as our waterfront gets busier and busier every summer, current residents and future residents in the new developments have a beautiful green space to go to. So I'm hoping our staff come back with some great ideas on how to make that happen, but I'm very excited about it. Thanks for that question.
Thanks so much. So we've got NIS has got their hand up. I'm just going to. NIS, can you hear us, and can you unmute?
Yeah, I can hear you guys. Thank you, councillors and mayor, for this. It's a great forum, and happy to be a part of it. I'm here with a few of us here at Phil's Cafe, actually, and we're concerned, obviously, with the speeding. I know some other people are going to ask a question, so I don't want to steal their thunder, but I do want to say that we have a petition here of 50 signatures asking that Grove Street be turned into a 40 from 93 to Toronto Street. You know, it's a dead shot straight down Grove. People are getting up to 70. And I mean, we had the deaths in the area. Everybody here is aware of that. Now, I appreciate what Clara mentioned about, you know, targeted enforcement and notifying you guys when there's an issue. But what about traffic studies? I mean, the people here, when that was mentioned, kind of shook their heads incredulously because they have been saying every day and notifying people about this. And I understand that the wheels of government can be slow to turn, but is there going to be any efforts for traffic studies or something to quantify the issues going on in this neighborhood, so it's not up to the people here to call you guys or the cops every day, to actually quantify it and try to make those changes? And like Keenan said, you know, rework the infrastructure so it's not conducive to street racing. Thanks.
Yeah, first of all, you know, great choice. Phil's Cafe is a great spot. You're right. I mean, Grove Street is a straight shot, and it's a great place to open up the engine, I guess. And yeah, I mean, at the moment, it's really, we have to do more enforcement there, and to try to teach some of these folks what the speed limit is all about. And yeah, the difficulty is the road, and there's a lot of traffic there, of course. So I think enforcement is the answer there, certainly at this point.
Yeah, something I just mentioned too. There are the radar speed boards actually serve a dual purpose. So they show the speed, and I recognize that some people take the number flashing at them as a challenge, not a warning. But they are effective. We do before and after studies, and we know they actually do have an impact. They don't stop at all. But I think your specific concern is street racing. And yes, there's been an increase in that since COVID. It was particularly bad actually in the first couple of months last year, but we've seen it all the way through, as well as more aftermarket vehicles in terms of noise modifications. The dual purpose of the radar boards, though, is they also collect speed data. They record the speed of every vehicle that's passing, and then they feed that data to us. And what that allows the police to do is look at what time of day is a problem, and how high are the highest speeds, and is there a street racing issue, or is there a sort of consistently 15 over the limit issue, which they actually target differently in terms of their own enforcement methods. So so when you see those boards, it's not just the sort of, oh, we'll throw a board up there and hope that slows people down. It's us doing exactly what you're saying, collecting the data to allow the police to target their own resources as effectively as possible.
And I'll just add on quickly, and I'm sure you caught it earlier, but we are potentially going to look into lowering the speed limits on city streets, and that's something I've moved at council, and I'm hoping that passes, because I think we need to do everything we can. I'm glad you reminded us of the real human cost of this type of thing. I think we tend to accept that, you know, traffic deaths are just a part of life in our country, and I don't really understand why that is. It shouldn't be that way. We can actually prevent these deaths if we act quickly and we act with some courage. So I'm hoping we can have that change. Thanks for raising that.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks so much, Nis. We've got William with his hand up. So William, can you hear us, and can you unmute yourself?
You're talking about me?
Oh, yeah, thank you.
That's
Sorry.
Sandra.
Yeah, it's actually Sandy. Didn't know we were on.
My apologies.
Thank you for taking my
Well,
call.
all right.
That's okay.
All right. We're both here, though.
Yeah, we're here. Anyway, this is, again, another speeding and busy street. So we live at the intersection of Codrington and Dundonald. And again, it's a very busy intersection. There's stop signs on Dundonald and both sides. And I was wondering, because we have two sidewalks, one which ends on our side of the street and does not continue. So the people, children and adults going to Codrington School need to cross at Dundonald and Codrington to the other side to get to the sidewalk. I've spoken to Councillor Ian before, and I understand there's no, we don't want a stop or lights or anything like that. But I'm wondering if we can get a white crosswalk painted onto the road at that intersection, so that people are aware people are going to be crossing there, and perhaps a sign that says school children crossing or something like that, so that it's a little bit safer. It's a very dangerous intersection, had lots of accidents there, and again, speeding. So, you know, I don't know if that's a possibility with the traffic department or, you know, what other solutions we might come up with.
There's also the condo that's been planned and I think in the works for Dundonald Street coming up that hill. I think it's the old Hargrave house that I would think is coming down in favor of a condominium. That's going to increase traffic on Dundonald considerably. So there again, I think that having some kind of crosswalk or some manner to assist children and adults trying to cross Dundonald where the sidewalk comes to an end at Dundonald, sort of trying to cross Codrington, I think would be beneficial as well. And back to your point, Councillor Awen, about never accepting death as being commonplace for anybody across Canada. I think that this fits into that category as well. I think we all need to act with some foresight and some bravery from that perspective and slow people down. I don't care if we consider Codrington a trunk road and allowing people to speed excessively and at what expense. I mean, it's only going to take one child stepping up without seeing a car racing down the street, and it's going to be tragic. So we want to see something done there, and I think it's up to the city now to do something about it. We're happy to help out wherever we can, but we leave it with you, and I appreciate your comments. Thank you.
Thank you for that, and I really appreciate you attending tonight and raising that. So some good news. We just councillors just put in their requests for speed cushions for this year. And Codrington Street between Bursey and Dundonald is #1 on my list for speed bumps. So there will be a speed cushion installed at that location, which I understand doesn't solve the issue entirely, but it is one way of slowing people down. And previously that wasn't able to happen because there was a bus route on Codrington, and that has changed. So I'm glad we have this new tool in our toolbox to address that specific issue. On the question about a painted crosswalk, this is something I've asked our traffic department about for another area, and they told me that just painting the lines can actually make a more dangerous situation because it provides that false sense of security for the pedestrian, and the cars just barrel on through. So if you don't have a light, if you don't have a stop sign, it can be a nightmare. So that's something I'll follow up with our traffic operations department on. But that's what I remember them saying about that at the time.
Okay, well, that'd be great. Appreciate following up on that with traffic. I remember you mentioned that, a long time ago when we talked about this before, and we never heard back. So I'm a little curious to see if there's anything further on that. But okay, so if we take it that one step further, then if the lines are going to present a situation of false security, if that's what it is, then perhaps we need to look at a four-way stop for that intersection.
Mm-hmm. And I'll check with our operations department on whether a four-way stop investigation has been conducted there, because it may have. There are provincial warrants that we have to meet to put in a four-way stop. So it's the number of vehicles turning per hour, number of collisions, and you have to meet that threshold to get the four-way stop. But I will follow up on that as well. But and I have your contact info, so I'll reach out.
Thank you very much. If there isn't a four-way stop, is there a possibility of getting a bigger stop sign? People roll on through there. It's kind of covered by a tree, and it's not very large. I don't want it flashing or anything. I just a larger stop sign so that it's a little bit more visual because people come down the Dundonald Hill and go right through at Codrington many times. We sit on our porch and we see it. So, maybe a larger stop sign would sort of help that problem too.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I've seen other intersections where they install stop signs on both sides of the street so you can really see it. There's an extra reflective strip underneath the actual stop sign. So I will look into that as well.
Okay.
And we won't get you the bright neon sign.
Well, there is a limit.
If it saves lives,
we're good. We're okay with it. No, because I think we did discuss the flashing signs, and you said, no, that wasn't applicable. You can't put them up on the intersection.
I worry about little muffins walking to school. So whatever you can do, I appreciate it. Right.
Okay. Thanks for your help.
Much. Take care.
Right. Bye.
Thank you so much for that. So we've got Carol who has a question, and Carol, if you can unmute yourself.
Okay. Thanks. My question to you is difficult because I know your position on this, so I have to ask it anyway. Bear with me. It's 14 point. It won't take me more than a minute and a half to explain the question. Are you living from your heart is my question. Let me explain. When a person's perspective is heart-centered, they do what is best for everyone, and they are service-oriented in an unselfish way. When a person's perspective is more from a personal place within them, it is conditioned by the emotions and the limitations of the logical mind. From this personal perspective, what is best for yourself comes first and foremost, and thinking is often limited to and driven by fear rather than unconditional love and the creative thinking available from the heart perspective. I can no longer condone decisions made by government and health officials made under the influence of fear and ignorance and personal belief or personal gain. When decisions to protect the vulnerable 1% hurt, destroy, maim, and cause immeasurable suffering to the rest of humanity, the 99%, there has to be a stop put to that way of thinking and acting. Please direct your efforts to protect towards the vulnerable, that is to say, the elderly, the immune compromised. Treat the rest of us with the respect we deserve. And if you really want to help, then guide those needing guidance towards decisions and choices that boost their immune systems, which is something no one has done, other than the occasional mention of extra vitamin D. We have immune systems that are quite brilliant. They've been developing for thousands of years. So much more education would be a step towards helping, telling people that mask wearing isn't healthy would be a good place to start. I look around daily in horror at the hordes of people wearing masks needlessly out of ignorance and hurting themselves in the process when they are near no one, for example. And I don't hear anything about the scientific evidence that mask wearing is actually harmful. Nobody ever stands up to the current narrative. When we have the flu, we stay home to allow our own immune system to kick in and do its job, the one it's so well trained to do. COVID is now known to be not more dangerous than the common flu. So why am I not seeing people in government and healthcare speaking out in a way that reduces fear? Make mask wearing optional and forever ban lockdowns and social distancing because they have not worked. Look at the data. My question is not, do you have a heart? Because you do. Of course you do. My question is, will you be courageous enough to do what is right? Or will you choose what seems to be so many people's number one concern, which seems to be to protect yourself and not speak out and not be open to any other truth than the common narrative that we hear every day on the news, which I can no longer listen to?
Carol,
my question is very simple. I need somebody to say something that isn't just the narrative and old news.
I understand not everybody believes the information that is being given by our public health authorities and the steps that we've taken. But Carol, all I can say to you is that 23,000 Canadians have died from COVID, including 100 people here in our own community. And we've had the worst tragedy in the country in long-term care at Roberta Place. That was real. And it wasn't the flu. It was a much deadlier form of virus. And the science is clear. There have been studies after studies after studies around the world that show that mask wearing, distancing, limiting gatherings are the best chance of limiting the number of people who are going to die. And so while I understand that there are many people out there who don't believe that, and I understand that everybody out there is tired of hearing about this in the news, hearing the same story, being asked to keep doing those things, I will be able to look at myself in the mirror for the rest of my life and say that I believe that we are doing the right thing in asking people to do these things.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Lehman. I completely agree, and thank you so much for those remarks. And thank you, Carol, for coming forward, because I can tell from the emotion in your voice that you really care about our community and about people in our community, and that you're frustrated. I'm frustrated as well. We're more than a year into this pandemic. And frankly, I don't think our governments have taken the necessary steps to protect people in our communities. We can look to New Zealand to see the success they've had there, where they took a COVID zero approach. And I think if we had done that from the beginning, we wouldn't have these endless yo-yo lockdowns. And it's unfortunate that that didn't happen. But like Mayor Lehman said, 23,000 Canadians have died. That's 23,000 people, families affected, lives ruined. And we need to do what we can to get through this. And we are going to get through this. We're very close to the finish line, and I know we can do it. And I'd be happy to have a conversation with you offline, more in depth, to understand your concerns a bit more. So feel free to give me a call. Thank you, Carol.
Thank you so much for that. We have Bianca has her hand up. Bianca, I'm going to add you if you can unmute yourself.
Thank you so much for allowing me the opportunity to address my question. I actually, sorry, could you hear me? Okay, perfect.
Yes, we can hear you perfectly.
Thank you so much for allowing me the opportunity to ask my question. First and foremost, I am a new resident to Barrie. I had the opportunity of introducing myself to Claire back in the summer by writing a very detailed email in regards to, for me, that is, as a millennial and a first-time home buyer coming to the city of Barrie from the city of Toronto, and having two puppies, I was concerned rather as to the lack of locations for dog parks, as well as the lack of garbage bins around the surrounding neighborhood. So I just wanted to ask, as an environmentalist and a formal title holder in the past for the environment, what does the city of Barrie plan on doing as you know, more new generations end up moving up this way, as it is clear that not only have dogs that want to, you know, obviously play outside, and the lack of access of dog parks, but garbage collection, keeping our surrounding neighborhood extremely clean. I've only noticed one in my neighborhood. I'm right beside Cheltenham Park, and that's the only garbage that's in the entire surrounding neighborhood until you get to Johnson and Georgian.
Yeah, and I recall our back and forth, Bianca, it's a challenge, you know. I mean, we do have 2 dog parks, off-leash parks, that people use, and they use them a lot. So that is certainly available. On the other hand, I see people walking dogs up and down sidewalks and along the waterfront on leash, you know, all day long, all night long. So they do find their way in the urban area. So that's, I think, a good thing. In terms of the garbage pails, yeah, the difficulty is not only do you have to have the garbage pails, but then you have to have somebody that empties them as well. And we're always wrestling with that and the load that it puts on the tax base and all the rest of it. Yeah, and certainly in the Cheltenham area, and also in the Johnson and Grove area. I'm looking at that to see how we can try to figure out how to put a few more containers in there to handle that.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, I just, the reason why I'm asking about the dog park is I am well aware that like lots of people walk their dogs and it's great exercise, obviously for us, but the whole point, I think for me more than anything to have that means of an outlet is that during the pandemic, it was extremely difficult to be able to find a location where you could be socially distanced from other individuals and, you know, not just maintain your distance, but make sure that you're not coming to close contact with anyone else when you only have 2 parks. So I understand that, you know, this might not be a pressing issue, a dire issue during a global pandemic, but I also think that given the circumstances around mental health, this would tremendously, I think, from my own personal experience, help those that are looking to just get out, get some fresh air, especially now that spring is here and summer's around the corner.
Thank you so much, Bianca. We have a question related to that. Is there any plans on widening the North Shore Trail or making it more pedestrian or bike friendly? With the pandemic, we have seen an increase in usage from all sorts of individuals using it for various opportunities, and just any thoughts or comments on that?
Yeah, good question. I don't have the actual statistics, but from my view of it, it seems to me that this past year, the traffic on the North Shore Trail has probably doubled, and it may even be more than that. Just the other day, I actually sent an email to our engineers because the sidewalk along Kempenfeld is really starting to deteriorate. And you can see it over the years that it's gotten worse, and it's certainly in need of upgrading. So that's in the hands of our engineers. We'll see what they have to say about it. In terms of the trail itself, we don't have a lot of opportunity to widen it because there's just not that much space there. Although there has been some talk about having a better connection between the sidewalk along Kempenfeld and the trail itself, and also having some sort of connection from the trail down to the water, because there are a couple of areas where we could probably accommodate that. Also, there are some properties along the water past the yacht club that quite possibly the city ought to be buying, because that would give us more space there as well. Of course, unfortunately, those are privately owned, and it means that we'll have to dip into our pocketbook in order to purchase those. Yeah, I think that we're certainly looking at those kind of opportunities. I don't know how easily they are to be able to have them come to fruition, but we're working on it.
Thank you, Councillor. So we have a couple of questions related to the safety of the downtown. Is there any comments with regards to what's going on in our downtown, and any thoughts on how to make it more friendly?
Yes, absolutely. So a big picture, stepping back, sort of the long term, I'll start with that. One thing that we are doing as a city is ensuring that more people will be living in and around our downtown. More people living downtown means more eyes on the street, more businesses are open at all times of the day, and that means safer streets for everyone. So that's sort of one long-term thing. In the short term, I have been meeting with representatives from Barrie Police and the Downtown BIA, as well as some agencies locally about this very issue. We're working on a few environmental design pieces. So there's a police officer with the service who is trained in crime prevention through environmental design. And she has gone around the downtown and done an assessment of problem areas, alleyways, dark corners, that sort of thing, and has come up with some recommendations in terms of lighting. Some are to be done by the private building owners, and I'm looking to see what the city can do to help out with that effort as well. So absolutely, we're working on some of those solutions. And I hear you. It's definitely, there's a perception of a lack of safety in the downtown, and that's a huge issue. The reality is too that crime rates in the downtown are even with the rest of the city, and the city of Barrie is one of the safest municipalities in the whole country. So while it may get a lot of that attention, I think it's actually overall a fairly safe place, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't do our best to address the issues that we do see down there. Thanks for that.
Thank you so much, Councillor. So we have Michael is got his hand up. And I can just ask you to unmute, Michael.
Hello, how is everyone doing?
Good,
I just had a question about, we've all seen the sobering statistics about climate change and how it's related to our city. And of course, one way to alleviate that is to try to get as many cars off the road as we can. So we need to increase cycling in our city. And quite frankly, the cycling infrastructure in the city is quite embarrassing after kind of decades of neglect. I think Grove Street, that obviously runs through Ward 1 and Ward 2, is a perfect example. All that was done was just those pictures of the flattened bicycle on the side of the road all the way up is all that was done. And you see cars, I see it every day when I go to pick up my kids from school. Drivers are all over it. You hardly ever see any cyclists on it because it's so dangerous. So I'm just wondering when the city is finally going to commit to installing more dedicated bike lanes, which have been proven, time and time again to be not only the safest for cyclists, but also the best way to get people to start cycling more.
Yeah, thanks very much for that. I'll give you the start, and then I'm sure Keenan will want to chip in, and maybe Claire. So, I mean, wind the clock back 10 years, and I think there were two bike lanes in the entire city of Barrie. There were nice little green signs that said bike route. That was it. What's happened since is a couple of approaches. First of all, when we reconstruct a road and we have the right of way to be able to install dedicated bike lanes, and Duckworth, Cundles, the area around the college, is a good example of this. It's designed into the expansion. Of course, in an urban environment, expanding a road right of way is almost impossible. So you need to convert space if there is space. And that's where the road diets have come in, where we've taken 4-lane arterials, further to Claire's point earlier, where, the 4-lane arterial has all kinds of empty capacity for vehicles because it's nowhere near full or busy. And we convert it to 3 lanes with the center turning lane and then the bike lanes on the shoulder. Both traffic calming measure and expansion of a cycling network. I think that the huge challenge that will exist, and I mean it's a classic sort of problem for a mature city, is in the older neighborhoods where by definition things are more mixed use, they're closer together. You see higher rates of on-street cycling. In the mature neighborhoods for lots of good reasons. Those are the neighborhoods where it is the hardest to either expand or even convert existing right-of-way to create the space. Not to say it's impossible, but it's that much more difficult. So Keenan is, I think, probably more familiar with the active transportation plan details than I am. I know our plan is very ambitious in terms of the number of kilometers of additional bike lane capacity we wish to add, and certainly every time that's come to council, it's something that I know has received support, and I would continue to support. And Keenan, maybe you want to pick it up.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. I'm on the Active Transportation and Sustainability Advisory Committee of the city. We have a great group working on this exact issue around that table. And our planning department has actually come forward with a plan for a cycle Barrie infrastructure program. It hasn't been approved yet by council, but they are working on that. It's going to be the city's first dedicated infrastructure program for cycling infrastructure, which is very exciting. We, like Jeff said, have ambitious targets within our transportation master plan, and it's going to take a lot of effort and political will to get us there. But I think we have it, and we can do it. I'm glad you mentioned the Sharrows, the painted bike on Grove Street. Our staff have advised that they're moving away from that as a model because there are some studies that show that they actually are less safe than having nothing painted at all. It creates a false sense of security, and it really does nothing to protect cyclists. So we are focusing on that high quality cycling infrastructure, like separated bike lanes that are up on a curb, a cycle track, so that there's hardly any chance of collision between car and cyclists. Those are the types of things that we need to get more people cycling in our community. When people feel safe, they're more likely to get out there and enjoy what our city has to offer on their bike. I cycle around the city, and I can tell you I might get some flack for this. I cycle on the sidewalks because I'm not going to take my life into my own hands on the street when I don't have to. It's legal to do so, so I'm going to do that. And until we have that cycling infrastructure, I think that's a decent solution. Obviously, letting pedestrians have the right of way. And I think we need a bigger cultural shift too about how we move around the city. And one way that we can start that cultural shift is to really reimagine how we use our streets and what's possible when we prioritize our streets for people instead of just cars. So one small way that we are doing that is by having open air Dunlops in the summer, which is pedestrianizing Dunlop Street, closing it off to cars on, it's going to be 15 Saturdays this year. And you see the number of people that come out and enjoy the space, and it's safe. You don't have to look both ways when you're crossing the street. And it's just a beautiful thing. So I'm hoping that those sorts of initiatives can start that cultural shift that we need in the long run. Thanks for the question.
Yeah, I'm very much lined up with what Keenan and Jeff have said. I think that people don't use bike lanes, and I think, Michael, you're absolutely correct on Grove Street, because who feels safe in that environment? It just isn't safe at all. And if you want to encourage people to ride their bike, then first thing is that they have to feel safe. And so I'm really glad that our planning department is hard at work trying to figure out how to make that happen. And there's a bunch of ideas around, and I think we can probably do something that does two things. One, make cyclists feel safer on the road, and at the same time reduce speeds. And I think what has to happen is we have to narrow those lanes, because I'm sure you're a car driver. If the lane is narrow, you're going to drive slower. It's just psychology. And if we can make sure that the bike lane is safe by putting a rumble strip or something in there, then I think we might just achieve two things at once. And I'm looking forward to that.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
We've been about 15 minutes over. I think what we'll do one more question from the audience, and I recognize there's many more people with their hand up. There's also something like 30 questions that people have sent in the Q&A, and there's some pre-submits. So here's what we're going to do, because we clearly won't be able to get to everything even with the extra half an hour tonight. We're going to do one more live question. Then I'd like to do the speed round. We do this in town halls where it's one sentence or less of an answer. Lauren tries to throw those questions at us pretty quickly, and we answer in one sentence or less. And then everything we don't get to tonight, which is the first time this has happened, but it's a wonderful thing because it shows the level of engagement. We're going to take all the questions from the Q&A. We will take the names off. So rest assured, we're not going to publish your name, but we will take the questions. we'll answer them, we'll provide a written answer, and we'll publish that. And I think we'll publish that using a few channels. We have our the city's website, we've got social media, and we've also got, when we post the recording, we can post the additional questions and answers in the comments. So hopefully all of you who are online tonight will be able to access the responses to those 29 or 30 questions that are in the Q&A. We just, we wouldn't be able to get to, there's now more than 60 questions between the hands that are up, the pre-submits, and the 30 in the Q&A. So let's do one more live question, then we'll try a speed round for the last 10 minutes, and then we'll try and answer everything else, folks, in the days ahead and publish the answers.
Wonderful. So we've got Richard up. Richard, can you unmute yourself? Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Hi, everybody. Hey, good evening, everyone. Thanks for taking my question. So as a resident and vested stakeholder of Ward 1 and 2, it appears from a public perspective, at least, there's little collaboration within city chambers and a little bit of a divide in ideology amongst councillors. Whether or not it's true, it seems like that from the outside looking in. So I personally believe Barrie has an exciting opportunity to grow from good to great. In order to do so, I believe that we need a strong downtown that is built upon a thriving business community, safety, perceived or real, family fun and entertainment. So what are your goals to change the narrative and perspective of the downtown and current city council?
Well, let me start. That's a great final question, and I'm really looking forward to hearing Keenan and Claire's answers on this one. Look, this is the most ideologically diverse council that I've had, and this is the 4th council that I've been privileged to be a part of. Easily the most diverse. That should be a strength in the sense that it brings that diversity of viewpoints. It is a weakness, though, when that descends into personal divisions or personal attacks. And unfortunately, there's been a little bit of that. And I don't think we should pretend that there hasn't been. We can differ even dramatically ideologically and still treat each other with respect. The core idea behind city council is that it is nonpartisan, which does not mean people don't bring their values to it. Just the opposite. You should be able to bring your values. Your values don't have to be compromised because of the party that you're part of. If you differ on an issue, we each bring our 11 individual views and values to those issues. But the core principle should be that you argue the idea, not the individual. And that is a rule. And that rule occasionally has been broken, especially in the last year, and that's unfortunate. So I would tell you that as mayor, and those who've read about some of these issues in the media lately will have heard me say, I'm the captain, I'm not everyone's dad. So I don't govern people's behavior, but I am responsible for trying to set the tone, and to some extent by chairing meetings to maintain that tone and civility. So I take some responsibility for when things have gone too far, although there needs to be accountability for the individuals who went too far, and that's what the Code of Conduct and an independent integrity commissioner are for. I will tell you, we were proud of how little business the integrity commissioner did in Barrie for years, and we are not so proud of that anymore, and I'm not, that's not a good thing. So there's a couple of things that I'm going to change as chair. I'm starting to enforce decorum rules more strictly. I believe there is a general feeling on council that when decorum is breached in the way that it has been, nobody benefits. And I don't blame all of you as residents for just saying, geez, this is just more politicians arguing, and this is why people get cynical about politics. Specifically on the downtown, and then I'll give the floor to Keenan and Claire. So you may have read, I've just started 3 task forces, including one called the West End Revitalization Task Force. We have an opportunity by investing in 3 or 4 city-owned parcels of land, and especially by investing in our public spaces. And we talked earlier tonight about the last corner of the waterfront. That's the link between the waterfront and the West End of downtown. I firmly believe that what we've tentatively called the Market Precinct will go from being an area where we consistently are hearing concerns from the public to being one of the reasons why people visit downtown Barrie and why people even visit Barrie as a community. That will take years. We won't fix that in months. And we will need a mix of compassion, root cause orientation in terms of addressing social issues, and particularly we'll need economic strength and investment to support our business community in that area. The private investment in the form of 2,000 new residential units in two blocks area, 3 blocks area, is coming. That will unto itself create a much safer environment, but it's going to take 5 to 10 years before that's built out. And unto itself, I don't think would be a complete picture. And I think that's one of the reasons why this council still has the opportunity to make strategic investments in that area of our downtown that can really drive the economy and create a safer public realm. And I believe there are ideological differences about how to address some of the social issues in our core. There are a few questions around, I think, differences around the importance of the downtown business community, creating great public spaces that people feel safe in, attracting people to that part of the downtown. And, you know, when you're a captain of a team that doesn't always agree, sometimes you got to push hard on the things you agree on, and then we try and find our way on the things we don't. But all of that being said, you know, my core belief is that there is no safe downtown without supportive housing that ends chronic homelessness, without harm reduction and treatment that addresses addictions, and without investment in mental health. And that's the social side. And there is no successful west end of the downtown without a strong economy. And that honestly can be, to my mind, it has the potential to be an economic engine of our city. A market district that has a food market, that is an incubator for small businesses. It already is. It can grow. That is a tremendous residential neighborhood, a vertical neighborhood, but a tremendous residential neighborhood. And then opportunities like the former Sea Cadets building. We need to get that boathouse built for the cadets on the South Shore so that we can create a tourism pavilion on that site, maybe a restaurant, maybe a patio. I mean, these are the modest projects that we can invest in that corner of our waterfront and that part of our downtown that can really dramatically transform the environment. But I do want to close with this thought, because I always want to talk about, I always think this is important when we think about our downtown. You know, if we, I often talk about the Byward Market area of Ottawa as being a model for this part of our community. And it's not just because, you know, the Byward Market building is relatively small and our transit terminal, if it becomes a market, it's relatively small, but it anchors a whole district. And it's a tourist attraction. And it's an attraction in part because the incredible diversity of food and small shops and unique street environments, very pedestrian oriented area of the city of Ottawa. It's not sanitized. It is a mix of people of all incomes and variety of backgrounds. And I think our downtown will always be that. And that's not a bad thing. It is possible to create great neighborhoods with a absolute diversity of incomes and housing types. And I believe the west end of our downtown can be that. But it will require a continued focus from council, which is why the West End Task Force, and a continued focus of investment in the forms of bringing new residents. And ultimately, the safest neighborhoods are neighborhoods where people are invested in them, both in terms of their business and their homes. And that's why bringing thousands of more people to the west end of downtown is the very best thing we can do to make it safer and stronger.
And I couldn't agree more, Mayor Lehman. You said it very well. And thank you for that question, Richard. I hope your maple syrup boiling that down is going well. That's a big effort.
Thanks, Keenan.
But I like to think of the stage that Barrie's in. It's almost like we're going through a midlife crisis, where we're struggling a bit to find out who we are as a city. And that creates some tension, that creates some bumps in the road. But I think ultimately we're headed in the right direction, and we're going to come back stronger and more united on the other side of these issues. And there's a lot to be hopeful about. And I think Mayor Lehman just went through a whole list of things we should be hopeful about. We have the new Dunlop streetscape as well, which is just fantastic. And it's encouraging a really vibrant space in our downtown for everyone. And I really love to see that. You know, we've got the library doing fun and innovative stuff in our downtown, connecting people to essential resources. We're going to have the YMCA on the west end of downtown that'll bring new people in, and the people living there can benefit from that as well. And you know what? I think if we bring all those forces together, you know, the businesses, the social service agencies, the people who live down here. I live down here right on Dunlop Street. I'm in the heart of the action. I think if we bring all of that together, then we really can create a vibrant, safe, and beautiful downtown. Richard, I think you're going to be part of that too. So thank you.
That was well said. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, and I might just chime in for a minute. I think Jeff and Keenan have said it very well. I think, yeah, it's true. I mean, we, around the council table, have some very different opinions and very different approaches. I think that, you know, we really do have to be able to disagree without being disagreeable. And I think that that's starting to develop as well. And I think, yeah, I really see that everybody is very much in tune with going from good to great as far as Barrie is concerned. I mean, if you think about it, you know, we agree around the council table far more than we disagree. We've done 3 budgets. The last one was a little tough, but, you know, we got it done. And it wasn't necessarily easy, but at least, you know, and I think the other part of it is, you know, we've approved projects in the downtown and approved developments in other areas of the city. And there's a great deal of unanimity as well. Yep, occasionally, you know, there's disagreements, and you know, any live and vibrant city has to have diversity, and that's just part of it. So I'm good with it. And I think, yeah, we have to learn to disagree without being disagreeable, but I think that's coming.
Well said. Okay,
Thanks.
Lauren, why don't we take sort of 5 minutes more and do a speed round as best we can. Rest assured, everybody, we will take the questions that have been submitted in the Q&A on Zoom here and try and get those answers out afterwards as soon as possible in a published format, but with anonymized, taking your names off. Okay, speed round, go.
Okay, first one up, grocery store downtown Barrie. When's it coming?
Not soon enough. No new information. The owner is attempting to attract a tenant.
Okay, we've got pickleball at Strabane. Any plans to resurface and make that strictly pickleball?
I would love to. It's a question of budgets, and yeah, that's what it is.
Awesome. With the new streetscape, there's been a little bit less bike parking. Do you think there might be some additional bike parking for open air Dunlop or regular use?
That's a good question. There are actually more formal bike racks now than there were before the streetscape was done, although we did lose, you know, some parking meters that I know are being used as bike racks. But that's definitely something that the Active Transportation Committee has been talking about. And so stay tuned on that.
Any plans for Blake or Duckworth repairs?
Duckworth is been pushed back because we're doing Bell Farm Road and we don't want to have both streets torn up at the same time. Blake Street, there is a water main replacement work going to go on, but full urbanization is still a few years away.
Perfect. Councillor Aylwin, we've got some questions about road conditions around Vespra, John Innisfil, around that area.
Yes, absolutely. So there is the Brock Park neighborhood reconstruction project that I think is beginning this year or next, in the next few years at least. And most of the streets are being completely reconstructed, including the underground infrastructure. So that'll be a huge difference in that neighborhood. There are some streets that aren't included in that project, and there we're still gonna have to do some patchwork. So you can send in the particularly problematic potholes to Service Barrie at barrie.ca. That's the best way to track those and get that done. Thanks.
Awesome. We've got questions about speeding. Any thoughts to red light cameras? Whatever happened to those? Or have you ever thought about using speed cameras like they do in the city of Toronto?
Yes. Sorry. Red light cameras probably will be second. The first would likely be photo radar in school zones.
Any thoughts to exclude e-bikes from city paths?
So, geez, Lauren, we just had this question, and my apologies for not remembering the answer off the top of my head.
There are some requirements with regards to them having pedals. They can have speeds, but they don't differentiate under the Highway Traffic Act between an e-bike and a bicycle as long as they have pedals. I do recall that, but we can certainly follow up some additional information.
Yeah.
Okay, what about Eastview, the ball diamond there? Do you think there's going to be any plans to reopen public sports fields this summer, just to have extra space for people to play and socially distance?
Michael Prowse, speed round. Ball diamonds. Any discussion of when we might reopen if public health permits?
Mayor Lehman, you put the pressure on me for a speed round. Short answer is the ball diamonds in those fields are closed as they are seasonally. We expect as the weather progresses that they'll be reopened again. There are restrictions from the province on what sports actually can occur on them, but that is, as you know, changing often by the week. But the short answer is the city facilities and ball diamonds outdoor should expect to reopen as the weather allows.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Mike.
Okay, quick question about the overcrowding of waterfront parks. What are you doing about that?
Vaccine passports. No, that was a joke. We have retained the same parking prices as last year. The Wilkins Beach, as well, as you may have read in the last day or two, council has approved a staff recommendation to close it because of the environmental damage. It was never intended as a public beach, so it will not be open at all to the public. We are anticipating, with the pace of vaccination, this problem, if it occurs at the start of the summer, will decline over the summer because we anticipate restrictions will come off over the summer. However, at the moment, the plan is to use the same parking prices to at least recover the costs associated with people coming to the waterfront. But as you may remember, this was really a result of the regional reopening that occurred last summer. And we anticipate that things may be a little bit different this time around. It may not be so in May, but it should be by July for sure.
Thank you, Mayor. So we have another question about, are they being reissued by the city?
Sorry, we lost you there, Lauren.
My apologies. The residents asking about waterfront parking passes. Are they being reissued, or can residents still use the same ones?
Michael?
Mayor Lehman, to be 100% sure, I would have to double check, but I believe we are, since we haven't mailed out any new passes, the existing passes are continuing to be used.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure we're still honoring last year's. We'll double check though. Please email in if you want a confirmation.
So we have a question about the barriers along the 400. The province is noting that barriers along the 400 corridor would be about 2031. Is there any way to increase the timelines on that, or any thoughts about the necessity of?
Email your MPP, Doug Downey. And I'm not being facetious. It's a provincial project, and they control all of the timing on that. So that would be a great thing to message your MPP about.
Yeah, and just it's Andrea Kanjan or Doug Downey, and we can certainly help with any additional information. So Mayor, just looking at the time is 8:35. I'm suggesting we conclude our speed round unless you'd like to continue.
Well, as much fun as that is, no, we should probably wrap things up for this evening. Thank you to everybody who stayed on. I know the numbers have gone down a little bit, but many of you have stayed with us. For those who were not able to ask their question or unable to, we of course are available through multiple channels, all three of us, social media, email, call, and we will try and answer your questions if you didn't get a chance to ask it tonight. Lauren as well, for those of you who emailed a question, you can email her your questions, and the Q&A that we didn't get to tonight, we will endeavor to answer and publish. I really want to thank everybody for coming, in no small part because you beat Ward 8. Ward 8 had the record for number of people for a town hall meeting. Now we're a 2-ward meeting, but even dividing by 2, you set the record for most engaged wards in the city, and no surprise to me, having once been a Ward 2 councillor and knowing how well turned out town halls in Ward 1 are. So thank you to everybody. Thank you for your questions tonight. Thank you for the obvious care for your community in so many of those questions. That's how we are going to get through these tough times together, and that's how we're going to come out of this building a stronger Barrie. And thank you especially to Lauren, who organizes these town halls, CAO Prouse and Nina from my office for being here, and of course, Councillor Owen and Councillor Riepma for your great work on council. So thanks everybody. Have a great night. Stay safe this Easter, and we will talk to you soon. Okay. Good night, everyone.
Thanks so much, everyone.
Good night, everybody.
Talk soon.